So Egil, you've navigated the very complex, or at least I would imagine very complex dynamics of combining open source with like a sales-led enterprise offering. Especially like me coming from a sales background from HubSpot, I would imagine that both internal and externally, it might cause a bit of challenge to pull that off. So it would be really interesting to start by hearing a bit like high level on your experience and insights from combining those two very distinct go-to-market models.
Absolutely. It's a very good question. There's a lot of kind of angles into that. So maybe start kind of just introducing briefly open source and why open source and how does this come into play. So open source basically is meaning we are giving away the source code for free. So for this conversation, I think we should just think about it as kind of a freemium model. If I may kind of introduce another angle as well to this, we are also selling developer tools. So we are selling to software developer, which is to a lot of extent, I would say, a special kind of people to sell to, or they basically don't want to be sold to. So I think actually the open source model per se works very well in this category. And the open source part is basically giving away the tool, right? So it's free. There is multiple ways to kind of wrap that into kind of a more commercial model. What we have decided to do is what is referred to as an open core business model. So what that means is we are giving away sort of the entry level part of the product, and we have decided to have gated features for where the commercial part kicks in. So you asked about the challenges, dynamics internally as well as externally. And let's start on the internal part, because for us starting up this motion, it was very important to be very clear from a product strategy point of view, which one or where does this product bundle, meaning the open source, fit, and what is the kind of the buyer persona and what are their needs compared to moving up to sort of the self-led and what is the most interesting one that you touch upon, the sales-led enterprise sales, right? So for us, it was the tension that you sort of point towards was something we identified very early. So we decided also for that very reason to start this from day one, meaning we have an open source product, we have an open source or open core business model. So let's start with kind of go to market as an enterprise-led type of sales motion. And it was a handful of reasons to this, because it's an open source. The beauty with the open source is that it's, or at least our approach to this is that the product was already out in the market. So we first had an open source project. It was built because of a need, and it was already out there in the market, and there was already an audience. And based on the feedback from the audience, meaning who was reaching out, what type of companies, what type of personas, it was quite clear to us that for our product, open source product, we were seeing a lot of traction from the larger enterprises. Of course, if our early conclusions were that we were a better fit for, the digital first startup type of companies, obviously we wouldn't go with an enterprise led sales motion on top of that. So it's sort of depending on the situation, on the category, on the market, and on the capabilities of the product, I would say. So number one for us was defining clearly who are we selling, or what is the best persona, what is the needs we are solving for each of the product bundles. So we think of the open core as or open source as an product bundle. So it's part of a 3-tier bundle, and start identifying what is sort of the needs and what is the value that we can create for the enterprises that you need to keep gated from a kind of a commercial point of view. And I think that sort of translates quite well into how to navigate that also externally, because for us, it's important to be very upfront and clearly communicating towards our market. So this is the needs, or this is who should be looking for the open source. So like for us, open source is individual developers, smaller groups of developers, not really a need for, the enterprise compliance, the enterprise security with the single sign-on, with the role-based access control. You have limited number of, project environments, which is important for developers, and other kind of very large scale needs. And soon as the open source, and this forces or allows the developers to start using our tool, get used to it, sort of do their evaluation, do they enjoy working with our tool? Is it great or is it not great? Does it fit their needs? And soon as this is sort of scaling to more, bigger, more teams, more developers, into kind of being a more kind of an enterprise capability or tool per se, the gated features is sort of triggering that sort of commercial need. And some is coming because they need the SLA, they need to kind of have a proper MSA in place. Some is coming because of the features, and it's a very interesting dynamic.
So how does that journey work then? So like you mentioned there that you have the freemium, like basically like a freemium model with, it sounds like a bit of kind of a product-led growth there as well, where you have some gated content, you're getting people to start using it. Would that be two very distinct personas that you would have, or would it be developers within an enterprise that would start using the tool and then, kind of land and expand from that? Or is it just two very distinct personas and two different distinct groups?
No, I think that we are seeing that the personas is pretty much the same, I would say. So our go-to-market is basically grow our open source community, make that available, build a perfect open source tool for the needs of kind of a small scale need. At the same time, we are still seeing that it's sort of typically it's the champion on our end would be kind of a principal developer, maybe a senior architect, maybe a tech lead type of persona. I would say refer to as a middle management type of persona in a large corporate. So director of engineering, or maybe even the champion would not be a VP, would be that the economical buyer would typically be an VP engineering. And it's typically the same type of persona that is testing out the tool, that is sort of ending up being the champion in the enterprise sales process.
And another big thing here that kind of tying into this as well, like with the open source, and do you have like an internal development team, or is it purely open source? Like how do you balance the kind of open source you mentioned there with developers, very opinionated, a lot of them. I know a lot of developers myself, and trying to sell to them. I have that discussion a lot sometimes with some developers, like, but the business got to do something to sell their stuff, but there's a lot of opinions, right? And,
oh my God, yes. It's a very opinionated audience for sure. So I would say there is a few areas, and I think this is also where this is very difficult. This is not an easy task for sure. So basically you have sort of two distinct needs. You have the needs for think of it as the developer, the purist that is saying this is community, it's supposed to be free. I think that initially we thought that was being a stronger force than it ended up being. And the reason for saying so, we find that most developer has developers tends to be smart people. So they understand that you are in business. They understand that there is a need for you to make some money to kind of make the project survive. So I think that is an important takeaway. So, but coming into this and balancing these two needs, there was a few kind of measurements we put in place quite early. So one of them was saying, okay, we need to, regardless of open source or not, but I think this has sort of also supported us in making sure we are balancing this needs good. We need to make sure we do have the Net Promoter Score in place. So kind of very early on, one of the first hires in a company was like our quality expert on NPS or customer journey. So for us, it was important to have an individual that was purely focused on taking care of all of the frictions that will be between the open source and the commercial, between the customer success team, the product team, and the sales team. There is always going to be frictions along the customer journey one way or the other. So we decided very early on to have like a senior person in the management team with this sort of, this is the KPI, this is your kind of responsibility. You are think of it as the voice of customer. And it's a bit of I've seen this role getting more and more common in management teams, but it's not very common role to have, to my experience, in most product organizations. They should have it, but it's not necessarily so. So that was number one. So keep kind of a close eye on the Net Promoter Score. That will tell you a lot of what is going on there. And the second part is basically It's about being very focused around your product management, because you will always have the conflict in any product organization. Where and how do you prioritize your product capabilities, or where do you take the product? So what we decided to do for us was basically saying we want to have a very clear product vision. So for us, we have a clear product vision. We are a product company, so that should go without saying. And supporting our product vision, we have identified also what we refer to as our strategic areas for the product. So we are saying for the product, we need to develop the product in certain directions. So for us, it's a developer experience. It's a very important pillar. We are here to serve enterprise businesses, so operational excellence is very important for us. And using the strategic areas for the product, it allows the product management team to quite clearly make prioritizations on, do we develop the product in the direction where we want it to be? And of course, then the second part is also, how do you balance the enterprise needs versus the open source needs? So one of them, it's clearly coming from the Net Promoter Score. So we see every now and then it's dropping. It's quite strong. So in general, we average around, I think, in the 60s, which is super, super good. But also we see that there is scores coming. So we can see from open source customers, one of the early feedbacks we got was okay, features are good, but the documentation is not really there. So that was a repeated theme. So for us, it was quite important to strengthen the documentation piece of that. That's like one very concrete example. And it's also come back to who is the voice of what type of customer. So we have the VP of revenue, obviously is always very focused around what is needed to sell. And our CTO, CPO, and my co-founder, coming from the open source environment, very much focused and taking care of and protective of the open source. And I think this is having these two strong personas in a management team, supported by our customer journey, head of customer journey, is it's a good setup. And of course, the end of that, to make that work, is building a team and not individuals. So for me as a CEO and head of this company, it's really important that we have one team. We are partners. So it's not like you as my VP of revenue are only measured on the revenue. Of course, that is the KPI. That is the make it or break it for him and as well as the company. But then again, it's, if we cannot have a partnership where my CTO which is acting as the decision maker on the product side, doesn't really understand the business side, and the business side doesn't really understand the importance of the open source and the trade-offs that we are constantly doing, that then we will start breaking down a company. So I think it's a mix of many things. You need to have the structure in place. You need to have some of the key responsibilities in place. And by any company, you need to have a very strong team. I believe in a team. I don't believe in anything else. The team is always important than anything else to me.
I'm starting to get too many questions here, because it's really interesting. There's so many interesting points here to go into. So, but yeah, I would definitely imagine that, especially the way you've structured it with the kind of open source combination, that it's even more important with that alignment, and people really need to understand what's going on, what are we doing anyways. So one thing I want to go back to a little bit there is, with the kind of freemium model there, one experience that I have sometimes is you just feel that, oh, this is just designed to get me started, and I know that within a week I'm just going to upgrade if I want to use it. So there's not even a point starting with the free version, because it's so limited. So how do you think about getting an open source model, a product that is not so limited, so it feels like a kind of a trick, so to say, to just get people to buy, and getting it useful, and actually having a natural journey? You mentioned SLAs and some of those kind of more enterprise features, but how do you come to a good conclusion there in terms of what to do and how to do it?
Oh, that is really hard. But it comes back to, I think that is going to be one of our challenges moving forward, as well as, because it's tempting to put a lot of gated features, because, it drives, or at least initially it looks like it will drive a lot of commercial value. So one of the let's say, rules that we have put in place, or guidelines for us, is saying, so for us, trust It's really important value for the company. And also we are thinking a lot around what does that mean? So for us, trust means if you as a developer are using our open source tool, you need to have trust in us to not start pulling out features to kind of start to push you towards a commercial one. So we are putting a lot of effort into saying that we can never take away capabilities that is in the open source, even though it could possibly lead to some short-term value for commercially set. That's sort of leading to trust. Trust is hard to everybody knows it's hard to build, and it's really easy to kind of ruin. So that's rule number one. And because of that, we are also always pushing new feature where we don't really know where it should sit to the enterprise first, which means that when we are in doubt, is this something that should be on a commercial gated feature, or is this something that belongs in the open source? If the conclusion is really clear because of the personas and the needs we're trying to solve, we put it in enterprise first. And what does that lead to? It leads us as a company to give something to the community. So it's sort of better perception for us saying, okay, we had like one very early feature. It was very much kind of a requested one. It was sort of a very technical, it was called a strategy constraint. So we don't really need to go about it at me, but it was sort of a very important feature for the product. So for us, it was a lot of pull. We put that in the enterprise version. And for us, it was sort of for us to build up that sort of the number of gated features. But over time, we saw that this feature was really solving the need of the open source users. And it wasn't really anything tied to the enterprise needs per se. So we could keep it there to kind of just have that commercial value and push towards commercial. But we decided for that purpose of saying, okay, let's be true to our promise to our open source community and allow that to go into the open source. So for us, it was sort of, we could do a big announcement saying, hey, we are giving something for free to the community. This is our gift for you guys. It was a gated feature. Now it's free. And here you go and enjoy. And ever since, we have sort of seen that, I think about an annual basis, we are doing those small kind of give back to the community. It feels good for a company. It builds credibility in the open source. And we are sort of using this sort of way of how the features are putting into the product in a way that I dare to say it gives a positive spin. Obviously, we do see from a certain open source purists that they'll say, well, it doesn't make sense for you to don't make this open source immediately. And of course, you will just need to accept that. But I think that is some of the measures and guards we have put in place to kind of try to avoid that challenge. But it's not easy for sure.
I think it's like that balance that we talked about here with like user growth versus revenue, because sometimes if you put too much limitations, you're going to stifle the user growth. But as you said, like the short term, you might benefit in terms of some additional revenue. But a question that I had here as well, like that just came to mind, like, so say that I'm a sales, like, so I'm a part of the sales team here, and one of my favorite products, I would imagine that could happen sometime. You mentioned there that that feature that you launched there for enterprise first, and all of a sudden, like maybe one of my main selling points for the paid product, all of a sudden is free. So I would imagine there would be like a big challenge with like really making sure, as you mentioned before, everyone is aligned, and also training the team to really be very, very, very focused on the customer experience and things like that. Or is that something you've kind of seen? And if so, how do you kind of work with that?
Yeah. I would be a bit bold here and say if that is the case, you probably have a very weak commercial offering. So we haven't really seen that sort of. So we are obviously trying to avoid, and like everybody should, to sell on features. So every now and then you go into sort of a featured war. But I would say if you're dependent on individual features, it's probably not going to be a sustainable competitive advantage for yourself, right? So for us, it's sort of focusing more on what is really the needs, what is really the kind of the challenges, pains that we are solving for the customers, and what is sort of the bouquet or the number of features that together will deliver that capability, or what are the capabilities in a product more than anything that really help you to solve that pain and reduce that sort of challenge for you as a customer. So, no, we haven't really seen that. I think that individual features very, very hard to build sustainable competitive advantage on individual features, probably, but it's not like a long term. It's sort of for a short period of time. And, if there is this killer feature that everybody just wants, I'm pretty darn sure that the competitors will develop that as well.
Nice. Okay, so you haven't seen. I just thought that it could be like annoying because developers have a lot of opinions and sales also have a lot of opinions. So, like thinking from kind of my experience, like I haven't specifically had that myself as an experience, but I just thought that it might be something. But it's good to hear that you don't have that. Another thing that we touched about that, I think that was really interesting with the customer journey, and that you actually, one of your early hires was someone who can kind of map that out, which I could definitely imagine that would be really, really important from the kind of go-to-market structure that you have, and that I would say more and more companies are going towards the kind of PLG motion. Besides, you mentioned their NPS, but what would you say would be some of the big things that you kind of uncovered and worked your way around in terms of removing friction throughout the journey to create a really good customer experience?
I would say it's so many things. Our experience to this is basically that anytime there is a handover internally, there is going to be a friction point externally. So when you have a handover from sales into customer success, that's, it depends on how you structure the company. We have decided to structure the company in a way where customer success is not part of sales. So there is 2 individual managers in the management team. One is responsible for customer success.
So you said that they were in the same team or not? They
were not. Exactly. Yep. We're not. So it's one responsible for customer success and one responsible for revenue. And that handover is definitely causing frictions for the customer, not because we want to, or that there is an intention to, or that they are not working great together, but just the fact there is these items matter. So having this customer journey mapped out and sort of we are doing an Net Promoter Score, as you mentioned. We're also doing CSAT, or the customer satisfaction scores. We are doing, I can't remember all of them. I think we're using 4 different ways of measuring this. Built into the tool, also part of our customer success conversation. We also measure this. We also support team is measuring this. So we are very focused on receiving this feedback on any areas. And soon as we are identifying that there is a friction point, is sort of very important for us to go back and saying, okay, how can we improve that? The friction point could be just know we are not aligned on how we refer to our naming convention, right? So we refer to one thing here and another thing there will mean the same thing. And you as a customer ends up being, what the fuck is going on? Sorry for my English, because it's sort of really confusing. That's sort of the simpler things. But it's again coming back to having this one person on the team responsible for the customer journey, and I think also it's important because I think, or at least my personal experience from past software and product teams, is this customer journey mapping usually happens inside of the product, kind of, closer to the team, or more distant from management, so for me as coming in and starting this company and also being the CEO of the company, it's really important to have the voice of the customer journey at the table when we are doing the budget conversation, when we are doing kind of the KPI conversation, whenever we are doing the kind of the key prioritization questions. I want that voice at the table speaking up, saying, hey, there is something with the handover of the top of funnel into kind of the nurturing element of the funnel, because there seems to be, and then kind of going in more detail and sharing that level of insight, because everybody's so focused on doing their thing. So marketing very focused on the top of funnel, going into creating the leads, obviously, and generating pipeline. Sales very focused on doing their things, closing deals. Both of them really good, but the handover there, having another person just saying and measuring everything from start to end of the customer life cycle there is, I would say, make it or break it for how I'm building a company.
And how do you kind of internalize that? Like, how do you work with, because you have the high level person and then you would have sales and marketing. And I would guess there's, again, a lot of things and insights and learnings, and getting all that information across to everyone and having that's not just the external feedback with NPS and CSAT, stuff like that, right? But also the internal feedback and discussions. Yeah. Like how do you work around that? And the never-ending challenge, really, I think, for most companies to get that working.
I'm not sure if I have a great solution for you on that part. It's definitely hard. We have really I think it's I'm not even sure we are really strong. We are very focused and being better on that. I think it's a good mix of, you need to have the correct person, the correct personality in place. You need to build a correct culture in a team and in a company for kind of going together and understanding where you want to go. You need to have the tooling in place. You need to have the visibility and transparency on what are the feedback and pain points that is coming back. So for instance, one thing we do, we have a monthly town hall where we present the Net Promoter Score with all of the scores, with all the feedback. The Net Promoter Scores is available for everybody to go and if I look into the comments, all of the prioritization work happening in the product team is transparent and open to everybody in the company. But it's definitely, even though you have all of the structures, all of the systems in place, all of the kind of the roles and responsibilities in place, by the end of the day, it comes down to execution and individual people kind of really executing or not executing according to it. So it's, I would not say that there is a silver bullet to that. It's just a lot of hard work.
Yeah, and it's never ending. I think like that kind of that alignment. If like it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. And yeah, like I can definitely see like as long as you have people who understand what you're trying to do, I think that's like if you don't have that part, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to.
And it's I think, Brian, from all of this, we are talking a lot about the strategies. We're talking a lot about the structures and sort of the systems that you can put in place and sort of the roles that you can apply. But by the end of the day, is sort of what type of culture I want to implement in a company. And also one of the things that has been very important for us from the early days is really be very, I'm not sure if cautious is a good word in English, but sort of very focused or clear about what type of culture we would like to adopt into the company. And how we see it is sort of, you always have a company culture, right? So what does that really mean? So it basically means, well, how do we behave? How do we act? And more than anything, how does like the individual contributors act when I'm not in the room? Because that is what matters. It's easy for me to say, this is how we do it. And if nobody believes in that, they will do it when I'm there. But as soon as I'm not there, they will not do it. So it's sort of really building an understanding of what are we trying to achieve and why, and how we behave and how we are, taking decisions and taking decisions, not the routine, as well as what we talk about, what we don't talk about. And we are spending quite a bit of time actually as a management team and also as an entire company to kind of really put words into that, saying, okay, how do we live our company? How do we act in our company? What do we expect from each other? What is the behavior that is acceptable and what is sort of not acceptable behavior for us? I think that is also one of the measures, and this is not tied to the open source enterprise. It's sort of tied to getting what you want to get done, implemented into the company more than anything. So I think that is something most leaders will recognize.
I mean, I think in the end, like a lot of companies would have the same type of challenges, kind of. You have different go-to-market models, but like people are people, and a lot of the kind of core challenges will always be the same, I think, no matter what you're doing. So I'm actually going to end with like asking a question that I always ask in the end. It's a little bit more on the philosophical side, I guess. So what would be like one learning or insight that you've had that have significantly changed your perspective on business and or life?
Wow. That's a hard one. I would say, I'm not sure if this is really a proper answer to that question, but I would think one of the things I'm really trying to live by, both in a personal life as well as a professional life, is sort of never stop learning. Always sort of strive for getting feedback, understand what is, sort of take the next step, be really open for new ideas as well as. So I think that sort of learning, pushing towards sort of outside of the comfort zone through testing new stuff, learning new stuff, challenging myself on, one of the first rules in life, never apply the same playbook just because you know it. Understand what was the context of that playbook and why was that a great move at the time? And can you reuse some of that then, or do you need to adapt something because the context is different? So I'm not sure if that is a proper answer to the question, but definitely some of those ways I want to live my life, both professional as well as private. Learn something every day.
No, I love it. It's great. No, it's supposed to be open for a reason, because I don't want to steer too much into a certain area. And it's always super interesting to hear how people kind of take that question, like in lack of better words in English. But been an absolute pleasure having you on, Egil. So where can people go if they want to find out more about you and your company and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, I would say go to getunleashed.io. This is where we live. This is where you will find everything about our company, and the product is a great product for developers and tech companies. And, every company is a tech company these days, so everybody should go and take a look. And I'm writing my fair share of blog posts there on management leadership, and I think that is a good way to start, or connect to me with LinkedIn. It's also quite active there.
Awesome. Yeah, so great having you on, Egil. And hope to have you on again in the future.
Absolutely. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.